don't even think I can get on here to tell anymore. I don't know. Hey, there we are.
Hi guys.
Hey everybody.
Everyone.
Happy Tuesday.
Tuesday. We have a special guest with us again. Judy is back with us from Toklot, and she's going to be talking about Myler Bits and focusing on cheek pieces and how to choose the correct one and how they work. And also, this is a follow-up to a previous video that she did with us earlier, and we'll put that in the comments after this, but you'll want to check that out because it was awesome as well. So,
and make sure, as usual, that you leave any questions that you have in the comments or say hello. Let us know that you're here, because at the end of this segment, somebody is going to win a Myler Bit and a consult with Dale Myler. And not only that, but the first 4 people to comment, and I see some people rolling in here.
emoji! Priscilla, you are winners already!
The first 4 people to comment on this segment are going to win one of these sweet hats.
Awesome hats.
So make sure you get your comments and your questions in. All right. And with that, we are going to turn it over to you, Judy.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back. So in the first video, we talked mostly about the mouthpieces, because that's really the crux of the Myler philosophy, is finding the right mouthpiece for your horse. And the one thing we didn't have time to get to is cheek pieces. We get lots of questions about cheek pieces. And our philosophy is exactly that. The mouthpieces for the horse, the cheek pieces for the rider. So we spend a lot of time finding the right mouthpiece first. And then the cheek piece is governed, first of all, by your discipline. So obviously, if you're riding English or Western, or even if you don't really affiliate yourself with a specific discipline, then we would say, do you ride with contact, constant contact on the reins, which would be more of an English style, and usually two-handed, or do you ride with a loose rein, and then you ask when you want something, and you generally ride one-handed, or if you ride two-handed, you do it kind of infrequently. That would be more of a Western style. So cheek pieces have evolved kind of based on exactly that, contact, like how much contact you have to have with your horse to do the thing you're trying to do. So there are 2 basic, like at the there's lots of different kinds of cheek pieces, but at the root of cheek pieces, there's 2 basic types of cheek piece that everything can be kind of categorized into. So the first is what we call a ring cheek. So, and everybody's seen some variation on this. This is a loose ring, or an O ring in Western. This is a D, we also have, I don't know, I don't have an egg butt. Here's a Western. This is kind of a Western version of the D, this little offset D. But even though they look a little differently, they essentially all work the same way. So there's the ring bit, just has a ring on the cheek, literally. And then there are the shank bits. So this is a Western shank bit. Shank bit. This is a Kimberwick. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how rings and shanks differ and why we use one or the other, and like a few misconceptions about each of them. And then if questions come up, just flag me and I'll stop and we can talk about the questions and then kind of go on from there. So the ring bit, even in the 2 that I held up, you saw that there's 2 different styles. There's the fixed ring like this, where the mouthpiece and the ring are attached. And then there's the loose ring, or the O ring, where the cheek piece allows the mouthpiece, or the cheek piece passes through the mouthpiece on the end. So what a ring bit is for is very basic training. I will use one that looks a little bit more familiar to people. So this is your basic ubiquitous D with a single jointed mouthpiece. This mouthpiece breaks in the middle. See how it collapses? And we talked in the first video about tongue pressure and tongue relief. So what happens with this bit, because it can apply a lot of tongue pressure, the ring bit is used to kind of offset the amount of pressure it can apply. So with a ring bit, when you have it attached to the bridle up here, the bit can still slide around in the bridle. So there's quite a bit of movement possible. And then when you have the rein attached down here and you pull back, it pulls to the point of least resistance, and then it pulls back on the bit. So you basically have two options with a ring bit. You can pull or you can not pull. There's not a lot of other things that you can do with it. When you pull on this ring, it acts directly on the mouthpiece. So every unit of rein pressure that you apply pulling on this ring bit is transferred directly to the mouthpiece in a 1-to-1 ratio. So this is considered what we call direct rein action. So you're directly affecting the mouthpiece by pulling on the reins, which pull on the cheek piece. So that's how a ring bit works. Pull or not pull, and it's direct rein action. A shank bit works a little bit differently. So with a shank bit, you have what we call a purchase at the top where the bridle attaches, and you have the rein ring at the bottom where the rein attaches. So what happens when you have a shank bit, now you have basically what we consider to be a lever arm. So it's a mechanical lever. It's very much like the principle that, you know, if you're wheeling a wheelbarrow of manure, and it could weigh 100 pounds, and it's the principle of leverage is what allows you to lift that wheelbarrow. It's how the axle of the wheelbarrow is balanced in relation to the handles of the wheelbarrow that allows you to have a lever that makes you stronger. So if you had to lift that manure by yourself, not only would you smell terrifically bad, but you would also not be able to do it. Like, you would not be able to physically lift it up yourself because directly you're not strong enough. So what a lever is designed to do is give you a mechanical advantage. It's allowing you to do more with less. So in a bit, this lever arm has a pivot point, which is the mouthpiece. So what happens when you engage, there's so many things that move on this bit. When you engage the rein, so you pull back on the rein, and it tips the lever arm, so it's rotating it. So that will do a couple things. That will make this part move, which pulls down on the back of the horse's head, right behind the ear, so the pole. And it will also take the curb strap and lift the curb strap up. And I should have had the forethought to put a curb strap on it in the first place, but I did not. So I will do that now. I only have one curb strap, so I'm kind of making it do double duty on a few things. And if I haven't, now I'm never going to get it off, so I'm never going to be able to talk about anything else. That's just going to be the way it is, ladies. So, there we go. Oh yeah, and I put it on backwards, which is even better. So, yeah, watch the Bit Expert. It's a good thing I didn't try to put like a bridle together while you guys were watching. Holy cow. Holy cow. Let's try it again. Okay. Resuming our programming. So when you have the curb strap and you pull back on the shank, then it's going to lift this curb strap. So what that is designed to do, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but when you lift the curb strap, it actually keeps the bit from over-rotating. So with this lever action, you get pull pressure and chin pressure, and then as it rotates forward, you're going to get whatever this mouthpiece is going to do. So with this little mouthpiece, this is our 04 mouthpiece, you're going to get some tongue pressure. So when you pull back on the lever arm, you indirectly affect the mouthpiece. And so that's why leverage cheeks are called indirect rein action, because you're indirectly affecting the mouthpiece versus a ring bit, which is direct rein action. So the benefit to indirect rein action like this is that exactly what I just said, everything applies pressure in different places. So instead of just pulling or not pulling, now you're getting the pull pressure and the chin pressure and then the mouth pressure, and depending on whatever the mouthpiece is. So you've taken 100% of your rein pressure with a ring bit is all on the mouth, and you've dispersed it over these other pressure points. So the indirect rein action benefit is that you can use multiple pressure points versus a ring bit, which is fairly basic and primitive, and you can't really use a lot of different pressure points at all. The thing that sets people back with leverage bits is the idea that leverage can be too powerful. It can be too much. And it is very true that leverage magnifies your strength. So the whole wheelbarrow analogy, it makes you stronger. It gives you a mechanical advantage that then makes you stronger. So one thing you do have to be aware of with leverage is that you need to do more with less. So if you ride in a ring bit and you've developed a relatively heavy hand, when you go to a leverage bit, you really have to focus on how soft can my hands be? How little can I do to affect change in my horse's behavior or make the bit move or whatever it is you're trying to do. So leverage, it can be a really positive thing. It can be a really refined, sophisticated tool for your horse because you are using those multiple pressure points. But you also have to be aware that it can be a pretty powerful thing. And usually with leverage, if you want to measure the degree of leverage that a cheek piece has, the simple way to do it, you can see, is leverage is always the ratio of the shank below the mouthpiece in relation to the purchase above the mouthpiece. So just to keep the math simple, let's say this is a 5-inch cheek. Let's say it's a 6-inch cheek, and I have 4 inches below of shank and 2 inches above the mouthpiece of purchase. That's a 4-to-2 relationship, or 2-to-1 if you reduce it down to its lowest common denominator. So that's a 2-to-1 relationship. That means on a 6-inch cheek, for every unit of rein pressure I apply, my pressure is going to be magnified by a factor of 2 on the mouth. So if you have if you have an 8-inch shank and a very short purchase, then suddenly you've gone 7-to-1. Now that is a really strong leverage bit. So it's not enough to just look at the length of the cheek piece, though. You also have to consider what the mouthpiece is. So on a short shank like this with a little broken bit, this is maybe a 1.2-to-1 leverage cheek piece, the little HBT shank. And with this little broken mouthpiece, it's basically a tom thumb. It's essentially a tom thumb, which is a broken mouthpiece with leverage. But because the leverage on this is pretty mild, it's not that strong of a bit. So you can take the same exact cheek piece. This is a different mouthpiece. This one, I pick it up in the center, it doesn't collapse. So this is a curved mouthpiece. And between the two, with the same exact cheek piece and the same degree of leverage, the one with the broken mouthpiece is going to be the stronger of the two, because this one is going to apply significantly more tongue pressure. So it's not enough to look at the length of the cheek. You also have to consider what the mouthpiece is. And that would be true, for example, let me get this one out. So this is a 7-inch shank, and it has a correctional. And so I got too many bits going on here. Oh my gosh. So it's always the way with me. I've always got too many bits going on. So this correctional, if I pick it up in the center, it folds. So it is going to rotate down and apply tongue pressure. It does have a port. That's why it's a correctional. It's a ported bit that collapses. And so it does offer tongue relief, but it also has a 7-inch shank. So this one, ours is like a 5-to-2, so it's like a 2.5-to-1 relationship leverage-wise. So this is a fairly strong correctional, and it's also pretty quick correctional because of the way the mouthpiece is designed. But you could take this correctional mouthpiece, put it in a shorter shank, and now it's a little bit softer. So that is kind of how you understand the difference between a ring cheek and a leverage cheek. So do you have any questions this far?
Yeah. Priscilla had asked what these bits are made of. Can you tell us what our bits are made of?
Sure. So on all of our bits, the cheeks are stainless steel. In the English bits, if the bit has what we would consider a traditionally English cheek, like a D or this loose ring, then the mouthpiece is stainless steel, and it will have a little bit of copper inlay. I don't know if you can see it in the mouthpiece. If the bit is a Western bit, so if it's a Western cheek piece, then the mouthpiece on this part is going to be sweet iron. And the barrel will be stainless steel. So sweet iron is designed, it's what's commonly used in Western bits. It's a really nice iron. So it basically oxidizes over time. And this is what it will look like. This is what your bit would end up looking like. It'll start off by changing color and pitting. Whenever it's exposed to moisture, it will start to change color. So putting it in a horse's mouth, but if you live in a place with a lot of humidity, the tack store might already have started changing color, hanging on the wall in the tack store. because it just takes that little bit of moisture to start triggering this change. And the reason we use sweet iron on the Western bits is because it actually releases a sweet taste when horses go to take the bit, and it rewards the horse for accepting the bit. So we have found that horses are way more likely to accept the bit without a problem if they use sweet iron. We do not use it in English because it's not very well known, and we do have a loose ring, regular O2 loose ring that we make a sweet iron and a stainless steel version. And inevitably, if an English rider inadvertently buys the sweet iron version and it starts to change color, we immediately get a complaint email because their bit is rusting. And then we have to explain to them that it actually is supposed to do that. So we don't use it in English just because it's not as common and not as well known. But in Western, the majority of bits on the market today use sweet iron, and they would eventually all end up looking like this. So you can see where the stainless steel, this is stainless steel, this is stainless steel where it connects, where it's welded. But this part is the sweet iron. And we also use sweet iron mouthpieces on our combination bits. So the combination bit will have a stainless steel cheek piece, it will have a stainless steel barrel, but it will have a sweet iron mouthpiece. And then they all have copper inlay. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I should amend now that I'm looking at the Western bits. We do a couple black cheeks. We do a shank bit, and we also do this little black Western D. These are not stainless steel. So these are malleable iron, and that's because we can't put the thing that makes them black, we can't put it on stainless steel. But the little dots are stainless steel. So we do a black Western D, and we do a black S7 shank, and a black flat shank. And those are all malleable iron.
Leah has asked, which bits are legal or illegal for Western dressage?
I would, because there's a little confusion between Western dressage and cowboy dressage, and I would recommend going directly to the organization. I believe for Western dressage, the rules follow the same mouthpieces that are legal for USEF and for regular dressage. And that would be the 04, the 06, the 36, and the 33 wide low.
Okay.
To see which cheek pieces, because I know that they do allow shank bits.
There's this one right here.
Julia said, my horse has the plain ring bit with what is the next bit up? He leans on it. In English. An English bit is what she's talking about.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I'm not sure she heard.
Is she talking about, because I can't see her comment. So is she talking about a bit like this that has these little
Hit show.
Or should I show this one? Okay. Can you see that, Judy?
Oh, I see. So my horse has the plain ring bit. What is next bit up? So the ring itself is not the thing that's causing your horse to lean on the bit. The mouthpiece is the thing that's causing your horse to lean on the bit. So a plain ring bit, the only so if the mouthpiece is for the horse and the cheek piece is for the rider, the only thing the cheek piece is going to affect changing it is going to be how your hands work with your horse. So the first step for you would be to figure out what the mouthpiece is you're currently using, and then how can you improve that, and then consider which cheek piece might be more useful for you. So the downside to the plain ring bit with whatever mouthpiece you're using is that it is a really basic, primitive, direct rein action. So again, the pull or not pull, there is not a lot of finesse to it. So the ring that I just showed you, this is an English version. It's an English D, but we also have it in this little Western D as well. So this is what we call upside down. We'll just do that. So this is what we call a modified snaffle bit. So one of the things the Mylers really want to do with mouthpieces is control them in the horse's mouth. And with a ring bit, you just get a lot of movement. You get the bit slides around in the bridle, the rein slides around on the ring, and if you have a loose ring or an O-ring, then the mouthpiece slides around on the ring as well. And so it's just a hot mess as far as horses trying to figure out what you're asking. And that's why when you're training a young horse, a lot of people will use a loose ring, because it's a pretty mild cheek piece. It lets everything move. But if you're trying to train a horse to a cue, then it takes a lot more trial and error for them to figure out what's going on when everything's moving around all the time. So what the Mylers did is they modified the snaffle to be more like a leverage cheek piece without the leverage. So we call these the cheeks with hooks. So this modified D has a slot at the top and it has a slot at the bottom. And you buckle the bridle at the top so that the bit is held in the right position and it can't slide around. It's very similar, if you're an English rider, it's very similar to using full cheek with bit keepers properly. So it'll keep the bit stationary where it's supposed to sit. And then when you buckle the rein on the bottom, this slot is quite long and it goes all the way up just below the level of the mouthpiece. So when you pull on your rein, it will slide a little bit, but then it will actually allow you to lift the cheek piece, very much like a leverage bit. So what a modified snaffle does is it takes all the best things about indirect rein action. It takes the control over the mouthpiece. It allows you to engage the pole. It allows you to put curb pressure on here. It allows you to distribute your rein pressure. But because, if you remember when I was talking about how to just below up to above the bit, the mouthpiece, there's no actual leverage possible with this cheek piece. So you get the benefit of indirect rein action, but you don't have to worry about the leverage if that feels like something you're not comfortable with or you don't think is necessary. So it won't make the bit stronger, it will just make it work way more precisely and more kindly, and then you can choose the mouthpiece that you think your horse will need, and together they make a really, really nice training tool. So, like I said, we have it in the D with hooks, and the English D. We have it in this little Western D, which is super cute, I think. Just has a nice look to it. And this rein slot is big enough for slobber straps. They have the same little curb attachment here. And that would be, if you're trying to figure out what cheek piece, number one, you have to talk about your discipline, English versus Western. But number two, bit legality. Because in English, for example, cheeks with hooks are not legal for dressage. But in Western, they're not going to be legal for like snaffle bit. But for training, they work really, really well. So any other questions?
All right, I'm gonna pop this up here again because that was just pretty easy. And I can read it better. Judy says, I love my Myler Bits. I have a mare that is very mouthy. I ride with my contact.
So, hi, Judy. So to talk about a horse that's really mouthy, the first thing I would do is look at the kind of bit. And a lot of times it does end up being a loose ring. Because one thing that a loose ring will do, because a horse can move the mouthpiece up, they do. And they will play with it. And this particular style of cheek can make a horse very mouthy. So that just is a basic. As far as the mouthiness in general, if you're riding in a fixed cheek or if you're riding in a shank bit, then I would look at the style of mouthpiece you have, and chances are pretty good it's something that's applying too much tongue pressure. So then I would look at the mouthpiece first. I'd figure out where you're at in terms of what level that mouthpiece is, and if I would refer back to the video we did, gosh, was it so long ago in July? I can't remember. Where we went into depth on the kinds of mouthpieces and what the levels mean, because the level on a Myler bit refers to the degree of tongue pressure the mouthpiece applies. And whenever you change the bit, because you're seeing a sign of resistance like mouthiness, you always want to go up a level. If you stay in the same level, it's a lateral move. It's probably not going to help your horse that much. And when you go up a level in Myler, you're actually going softer. So you're moving away from tongue pressure and you're moving into tongue relief and trying to find something more suitable for your horse's personality, knowledge and behavior. So the better behaved a horse is, the better trained a horse is, the more self-control a horse has, the higher the level of mouthpiece they should be riding in.
Okay. Lori says, I missed the Mouthpiece episode. My 17-year-old horse has a low palate. Which one would you recommend? He gets fussy with any ported bit. I ride Western and mostly trail riding. And I'll mention that we will post the link to that first video in here somewhere. That way you guys can find it easily and watch that if you missed it the first time around.
Gotcha. So I would want to know what mouthpiece you're riding in now. And when a horse gets fussy in a ported bit, there's a couple things that can happen, not knowing what kind of ports you've tried. So when you're talking about a ported bit, let's get some examples going here. So here's one example of a ported bit. This is what we would consider in our line a medium port. It's not quite high enough to be what we would consider a palate pressure bit. So we do make a couple bits that are palate pressure bits, and that means that they use the palate as a pressure point. When you use the palate, the hard palate as a pressure point, it's for rein actions like this, like very minimal. So it's for riders that have really good self-control, or usually very specific Western sports use palate pressure bits, because when you bump the palate gently, it will ask the horse to drop his head. If you bump the palate not gently, unintentionally, or deliberately, if you are forceful about it, what it'll do is jack the horse's head right up in the air. Sometimes their whole front end will go up in the air, depending on how angry they are or upset. So the palate is definitely a pressure point that most riders we talk to who need help with bitting don't want to use. So most of the bits we talk about in a general conversation like this, we aren't talking about palate pressure bits. So just to be clear on that. So this one's what we call a medium port. It has a nice wide port, a lot of tongue relief, and the height is part of that tongue relief. So if you have a horse that seems to fuss in a ported bit and the port is not what you would consider a palate pressure bit, then the first thing to check is, if you don't, obviously a lot of people don't have the ability to look in a horse's mouth and judge whether or not the horse has a lot of palate room or a low palate. So the first thing to check is your curb strap. So with a ported bit like this, if your curb strap is too loose, then what ends up happening is this particular mouthpiece, because it's narrower at the base, it's going to sit on top of the tongue, and it's going to go on either side of the tongue. The tongue can get underneath. But if it's sitting on top of the tongue and the curb strap is not properly adjusted to keep it from over-rotating, it could stand up and bump. And then you'll see your horse open his mouth or get fussy or get basically unhappy. So first check the curb strap. And if the curb strap, when you have a curb strap on, if you have to move this cheek more than 1 inch to 1.25 inches before the curb strap applies pressure, then it's too loose. So fuss around with that a little bit and see how that works. And if you can snug up the curb strap slightly to be a little bit more accurate, and if that mitigates the rotation of the mouthpiece, see if that solves the problem. If your horse, as you have found out, has actually got a low palate, I did ask my vet once, he was doing dental work, and I just said, out of curiosity, how does my horse's palate, how much room is there in there relative to other horses you've seen? Because I could look, but I have no frame of reference to know what is high palate, what is a low palate. And he just gave me the weirdest look. And he was like, well, nobody's ever asked me that before. And I was like, well, I spend a lot of time talking about bits. So it's a point of curiosity for me. And he looked and he said, well, your horse has a cavernous palate. There's plenty of room in there. And I was like, oh, good to know. But other than that, you really aren't going to know. So if you've tried multiple ports and you know that they're not super high, they're under 1.5 inches, and your horse is still fussy, then the other thing I would look at is probably looking at some of our ported bits that don't depend on height for tongue relief. So one of our most popular is, I don't know if you can see this very well, this is the 36 mouthpiece. So on a regular, I'm just making a huge mess with my bits. Like, I cannot keep track of them all. So on a regular port, this is the 06. And you'll see how that port, you know, if you look at it from the side, the port stands straight up like a normal port. So when you look at the 36 from the side, it's actually tilted forward at a 45-degree angle. So that does two things. One is when the port is tipped forward, and this is your horse's mouth, the tongue can elevate behind the bit really easily. So the 36 gives very generous tongue relief. It's also a very wide port, if you can see how wide it's, it's a very wide port. So it's very generous tongue relief. And because it's tipped forward, it doesn't rely on height. And so you don't have to worry about not having enough room in your horse's mouth. And when you put the curb strap on, then one of the things this mouthpiece will do, because it's tipped forward, is that when you pull back on the reins, it will actually apply a little bit of tongue pressure because it's tipped forward, whereas a regular solid mouthpiece can't. It won't reach the tongue ever to apply tongue pressure. So it's a nice mouthpiece for horses that need to be handled without being overhandled. The 36 is a really cool mouthpiece. And for a horse that is really a good horse and genuinely needs some tongue relief but can't handle, whether it's his teeth or his palate, can't handle a wider, larger port, then the 36 is a nice alternative. And we make it in all the different cheek pieces. So you can get it English or Western, and you can get it with or without a shank. You can get a ring bit. You can get a modified snaffle if you want.
Okay. Jennifer asks, what bit would you recommend for pleasure driving?
Oh gosh, I don't have any opinions on driving. Driving is a really unique sport, and we carried some of the Myler driving bits because they make a huge number of driving bits. We carried them for several years. We had the half cheek, which is basically a driving snaffle, and we had the Liverpool, which is basically a driving shank bit. But we just didn't have the market. Toklat, we sell to tack shops, and the pockets of driving customers in the country are so small and specialized that we just never had the right mix. So honestly, I just haven't dealt very much with driving bits. We haven't had them for probably 10 or more years. But I would recommend, and Valley Vet can actually help you with this, you can talk to the Mylers, and they make draft driving bits. They make mini driving bits in their custom line. And Valley Vet has the ability to order those for you. It's just a little bit harder because they're handmade bits, but they have the ability and if they have the wherewithal to do that. But I would definitely consult directly with the Mylers on which one is, because they're definitely, Dale or Bob are definitely going to know and be able to give you some advice on how to go about bitting your driving horse. But I don't have enough experience with that to feel comfortable doing it. But the mini driving bits are adorable. I will say that. They're like this big. So.
Elizabeth asks, what's the best bit for OTTB that has a narrow mouth, an English bit?
Okay. So Elizabeth, it depends on what you're doing with your horse and how fresh off the track your horse is. So off the track thoroughbreds, if you're just starting the rehab process, regardless of whether or not the horse is going to end up being English or Western, the bit that we typically recommend is the combination bit. And that is this guy up here. And it's the one with the nose band. We talked about, oops, sorry, you can't see it. We talked about it in the first video a little bit. So the reason we recommend the combination bit for fresh off the track thoroughbreds that are just starting to rehab is that they tend to, the more you pull on a bit, so if you're riding in a regular ring bit, the more you pull on the bit, the faster they run, which is typically counterproductive to the training process you're trying to go through to rehab them into a different sport. What the combination bit does is it uses that tongue and chin pressure, the nose and chin pressure and the pull pressure to communicate with the horse. So it avoids triggering any of their old behaviors by using the mouthpiece right away. The horse is carrying a mouthpiece, but you're riding off the nose, chin, and pull, and it's a lot easier to rehab the horse starting from there than it is to try to figure out which bit won't trigger his behavior and start the rehab process. It'll just go a lot faster, and it's a lot softer for the horse and a lot more efficient. If your horse has been rehabbed and is already, on his way to a new sport, or you've had him for several years and you've been doing different things, and you're now trying to, you realize he's not doing well with the bit that you've got him in, you're seeing signs of resistance like gaping or leaning on the bit or running through the bit, or sticking his tongue out or rooting, tucking his nose to his chin. All of those behaviors are typical resistance, and we would just approach it as we would with any horse. The narrow mouth thing, unless you've got a physical issue like parrot mouth, the narrow mouth is not super concerning. It's just finding the right size. It's just making sure you have the right size bit and it's not sloppy big. For us, when we fit a bit, we like to see about 1/8 to 1/4 inch of bit on either side of the horse's face when the bit is centered and the reins are relaxed. And so that, to us, that's roomy enough that the lips aren't going to be chafing up against the cheek piece. There's plenty of room, for the horse's mouth to fit in there. So you just want to measure and pick a bit according to the size.
Okay. Here's a question from Teresa, and you kind of covered chin straps in the last video, but she's asking, how loose or tight should the chin strap be?
So if you are, it's actually the same regardless. Whether it's on a shank or, I'm going to have to put it back on that bit again. I'll never remember to get it right. I'll put it on this one. This one's a lot easier to see. So this is on our little Western D. So when you have if you can visualize, because a lot of people really don't have a good visual as to what the curb strap does. I mean, they know that it touches the horse's chin, but they don't really understand why. So that makes the adjustment really hard. I don't know if you can see it on my arm. So basically what a chin strap is supposed to do is when you pull back on the rein and rotate it, it puts a brake on it. So it's essentially asking the horse to give to the bit. So it pre-signals the mouthpiece, and then, as I said before, it's going to engage the pole, and it's going to apply chin pressure. So if you have it on really loose, and the worst thing you can do is use the 2-finger rule. So, because if you measure my 2 fingers and my husband's 2 fingers, I mean, he has hands like sausages, and so his fingers are huge. And as a unit of measure, it's really inexact. It is not adequate at all. So stand next to your horse, look at your horse. When you pull back on the rein, just stand there and pull back, watch the cheek piece rotate, and then adjust the curb strap to the point where if this cheek piece is about 1 inch, 1.25 inches rotated, that's when the curb strap engages. Most people will find they have their curb strap on way too loose. So snug it up and then test it again before you get on. And if you feel like it's a little too quick, then just loosen it a hole. Loosen it incrementally until you feel like you've reached a point where it's kind of like finding the clutch point on a car, where you reach the point where I engage my hands and I can feel it. I can feel it engaging on the horse, and he can feel the curb strap. And so it can take a little finessing. And if you're riding in a leather curb strap, then I would definitely recommend you check it every couple times you ride, because the leather will stretch, especially if you're a trail rider and it's getting wet when they drink. The leather will stretch over time, and suddenly you're just having to haul on your horse and it's not working right. And when you go to check it, you find out it's gotten significantly looser, and that's because the leather's stretched. So check it periodically. I tend to use our synthetic straps because they don't change over time. They stay pretty stable, and so I don't have to worry about it if they get wet or whatever.
I think that last question at the bottom is the last one we have not covered yet.
Both of my mares absolutely love 89-225 Comfort Mouth MBO2 level. Have you talked about the benefits of that mouthpiece?
So we did in the first video, and I laugh because it's a level 1 mouthpiece. So level 1 mouthpiece means that it applies maximum tongue pressure. And the benefit to the O2 is basically over, it's going to be over a mouthpiece like this. So the O2 is, I have one here actually. So this is the mouthpiece that she is referring to. This is the O2 mouthpiece. And you'll notice how it goes straight across. So in relation to the regular single joint, that joint in the middle, if you pull back on one rein, the whole thing locks up, and it can pinch. The whole thing locks up and moves the whole mouthpiece. So the O2 was designed to be an alternative to the single jointed mouthpiece. So instead of a joint, there's a barrel. And the barrel is a bushing that allows each side of the bit to move independently of the other. So that makes the signal for the horse, the rein signal, really, really precise when you pull back on the shank. And you'll notice it's also curved instead of folding into a V. So what happens with this one, when you pull back on the reins, not only do you get a lot of tongue pressure, but you get this unintentional clamping on the bar of the bar and the lip of the mouth. And when you make this into a U instead, it wraps the bar of the mouth and it doesn't use it as a pressure point as much as a single joint. So overall, if you've been riding in a regular mouthpiece like this and you switch over to the O2, your horses will really like it. But if you asked us to recommend a bit, we would say we don't recommend our level 1 bits. And then people say, well, why do you make them? And we say, because people keep buying these bits and we want them to have an alternative that they can buy. But if you ask us, a level 1 bit applies maximum tongue pressure. It doesn't matter what the cheek piece is. The mouthpiece mechanically will apply maximum tongue pressure. Then we would say most horses never need that degree of tongue pressure. And you could go the next step up. Minimal step up would be the O2 mouthpiece. So the O2 mouthpiece, just disregarding the cheek piece, looks a lot like the O4 mouthpiece, sorry, looks a lot like the O2, except that it has that tiny little port in the front. And so what that little port does is give the tongue a place to go under the bit. And so as you go up in the levels, that's why most of the bits they're more ported. And when you get to level 2, 3, and 3, they're all ported bits because we're trying to find different degrees of tongue relief that we can offer. So the O2 has some huge advantages over standard single joints and Dr. Bristol's and French Links. But if you asked us, is it the best Myler bit? We would say no. It's at the bottom end, and I have literally since the dressage rules changed in 2012, I've had zero reason to ever recommend a level 1 bit. That used to be the O2 was the only mouthpiece that we had that was dressage legal, and now there's a lot of other bits that are available that are legal that give better tongue relief, and there are better choices you can make. So we just really have no reason to recommend the level 1 bits. So if your horse is going in it and it's doing really well, then there's no reason to change it. There's no reason at all. If your horse is not resisting at all, is happy, relaxed, doing all the things you want it to do, then there's zero reason. That would be true even if you're riding in a single joint, and that was true, we would say there's no reason to change your bit. Whatever it is that is going on, your horse likes it and is dealing with it really well, then that's fine. But if you do see resistance, then I would look at starting to figure out maybe a better bit with better tongue relief for your horse.
Here's a question from Julia. What is the name of the bit that you put the chin strap on? Maybe
well, Julia, I put it on like 5 bits, so that is not helpful.
It was a lot.
Here it is. I think it's this little guy. So this is our Western D with hooks. So it's super cute. And this knob, because Myler is so much about function. I don't know if you can see this little bump here, that we get endless questions about this little bump because we tend to be, everything has a function on a Myler bit, and that has no function. It's purely aesthetic. So for anybody wondering, it just breaks up this hole here. It doesn't do anything. But it's just a super cute little cheek. It's got the kind of stack on the mouthpiece right here. And it just looks nice. I like it. And we offer it in a number of different mouthpieces. So.
Okay. We have a question from Priscilla. The V-bits, do they not cut the roof of the mouth?
So that is, wait, what did I do with it? That is an interesting question because if I am doing a seminar, and I'm talking about this bit, and I've seen Dale do it as well. And when I hold this bit up and I ask people what happens when you pull back on the reins, I would say the majority of the people that I'm talking to will say, oh, it goes up to the palate, because they've been told that it goes up to the palate. So the interesting thing about this bit is that if you're in the saddle, your degree of pull is like this, right? It's not like this. So it's not actually accurate to say this goes up into the palate. When you pull back on this from the saddle, it is going to rotate down onto the tongue. However, when it is sitting in a horse's mouth, a horse is just like a human being. So if you're sitting here watching this incredibly riveting video, relaxed, as you should be, then your mouth is closed, I hope, and your tongue is filling the entire cavity of your mouth, and it's resting against the roof of your mouth. So that means anything you put in your mouth is trapped between your tongue and the roof of your mouth. And that is exactly the same for your horse. So this single joint that sits in your horse's mouth, and you can see that the joint is, and I'm trying to make my hand, it's a little hard, but the the palate of the mouth is right here. So whenever you pull back on this rein, that joint rotates against the palate and is a source of irritation. And the irony is that sometimes people will look at a bit like this. This is an English, this is actually a dressage legal mouthpiece. This is a ported bit. And they look at this, and because it has a port, they think, oh my gosh, it's got a port, therefore it must be a really strong bit. But when you see how wide this bit is, the tongue sits completely under it. And when you pull back, the only thing that's moving is each side of the bit. This barrel is a smooth surface that will roll against the palate if it's touching the palate. So between these two, you know, which one is actually going to end up being less comfortable? It's going to end up being this, because it's going to be trapped between the tongue and the roof of the mouth, and this joint is going to rotate back and forth on the palate. The same is true with a Dr. Bristol. So I don't have a Dr. Bristol here to show you, but a Dr. Bristol has a plate in the center, very similar to a French link, except that it's rotated at a 45-degree angle. And when you pull back on the reins, that plate digs into the tongue, is what it's supposed to dig into, but it also rotates against the palate. And that's why it's not legal for, I think it's not legal in dressage anymore. So it just helps if you can kind of like visualize how it's working and put your hand under the bit and kind of see what the action of the bit is, kind of evaluate the action.
Okay. I think we've covered all of our.
Hopefully that answered your question.
I think so. Put that one up there. Here's a nice comment. Maybe we will end with this then and draw our winner.
I did have one other thing I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
So, because we didn't get a chance to talk about it the last time. And the one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about is transitioning. So now people are, you know, they're like, oh, I'm learning about bits, and I would like to think about maybe bitting my horse differently. And the one thing when you're selecting the mouthpiece and the cheek piece is remembering your responsibility as a rider to give your horse an opportunity to figure out how the bit is working. So if you're sitting at home right now watching this, raise your hand if you've ever gotten a bit from a friend or at a tack store and just gone home and put it on your horse and started riding. Right? So you're at home, nobody can see you, be honest with yourself. Everybody has done that at least once. So then you take this, like you listen to me talk about Myler and you get excited and you're like, oh, I'm going to get a level 2 or a level 2-3 or a level 3 bit, and I'm going to try that new cheek piece, and I'm going to get this thing that works completely differently from the mouthpiece and the cheek piece I currently have. So I'm going to go from a single joint D to a modified snaffle with a level 3 mouthpiece that doesn't affect the tongue at all. And what happens with horses is they are exactly like people, is they do not like change. So they would rather have the discomfort they're familiar with and they've learned to cope with than a new thing that feels better but is weird. So if you're going to change out your horse's bit and you're going to try something dramatically different, what you need to do is plan for that. So we recommend that you get an enclosed arena or a round pen, someplace safe, and you bridle your horse up and stand next to them and lift the rein at the wither and just ask them, if they're standing there relaxed and this is their head, ask them to give. Make contact and ask them to give and just hold the pressure. Don't pull, just engage and hold the pressure. And they're going to be like, whoa, this all feels different. And they're going to start doing the head thing and the bit and acting super dramatic. I mean, I have Arabs, so they're super dramatic about everything. But they're going to get super dramatic about it. And then eventually they're going to give, and you're going to relax the pressure. And you just to do that on each side of the horse until they become comfortable, in maybe 5 or 10 minutes, comfortable with the fact that this bit feels weird and different. It's not applying pressure, but it is applying pressure here, and I've never had that before, and I don't know what to do with it. It's especially with Western horses that aren't used to having nose bands, then they can feel like there's just a little too much going on. So we recommend for any bit change that you give that horse 6 or 7 rides, you know, doing the warm-up of testing, and then warming up, and then riding, 6 or 7 rides before you evaluate whether or not the bit will work for your horse. And it's your responsibility as the rider, if you've made all these changes, to really focus on your riding and your hands. And we talk, you know, we get a lot of questions about riders' hands. And every post I see on every forum where people are talking about bits, someone always says, at least 10 times, well, any bit can be severe in the wrong hands. And that is kind of true, but at the same time, you can't develop a good hand if the thing that you're pulling on is not responding appropriately. So if you're a new rider and you're trying to learn how to ride and you're on a sour school horse that every time you touch the reins, that horse roots into the bit, well, you're never going to develop a good hand because that horse is uncomfortable and he is not giving you the appropriate response when you ask. So you're going to end up with a super heavy hand. So bidding is really important for instructors, for trainers, to get the right bid on the horse so that the rider can actually learn properly. And a lot of times I see instructors and trainers, they fight so much trying to teach the student because the horse is not bidded properly and the student can't learn properly from the horse. The horse can't communicate properly. So those are the two things. One is that you transition properly and take your time and give your horse the benefit of figuring it out. It is literally like standing. It's when you change out a bit and you change it out dramatically, it's like me standing here talking to you and then suddenly lapsing into Russian or something. It's a change in language. It's absolutely a change in language. And then you expect your horse to just keep up with that and deal with it. And 1 out of 10 horses will do that, but most horses will fart around with it and fight with it and not understand it and do all the things that people do when they don't understand things, which is argue. They argue. It's not right. This is wrong. This is not the way it's supposed to be. This is not the way we've always done it. So give them the opportunity to figure it out and then concentrate on how you use your hands and how you can improve your hands and ask less, even if you're riding contact or without contact. If you're riding Western or English, it's all about how you ask. And so the cheek piece is going to be the thing that really helps you communicate your hands to your horse. And that's where you would focus your attention on the cheek piece should be, how can I get my hands to work better for my horse through this cheek piece? That's it.
Awesome. All righty. No more questions. All right.
Priscilla said, thank you for your time. We really appreciate you hopping on here with us again today.
Well, thank you.
And we look forward
it's super fun. I always like to hang with the Mells.
I know. Everybody do it. We're going to go ahead and draw a winner. So first off, I want to announce the hat winners. Which are these?
You four are getting a free hat.
And it's Priscilla Horton, Nick and Margie Bits.
No, the signal is no.
Julie Allen Craycroft and Lori Horning.
Yay!
Woo! And the Myler Bit and Consult winner is going to be Jennifer Russ. Woo!
All right, congratulations, Jennifer.
Very good.
So if you heard your name, go ahead and send us a PM and claim your prize.
Thank you very much, Judy, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.